Paula, can you hear me?
Yes, I think that's Tim.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can he hear us? Oh,
Okay.
I can. I just want to make sure you can all hear me.
Yeah, I'm going to expand to the east.
We are unmuted. Is there a vote there? We are unmuted.
Huh.
Paula
yes.
and others, Ellen or Councilmember Burrell texted me and said she's going to be a few minutes late. So
Okay, I'll let them know.
Automatically do it.
It takes a minute sometime.
Oh, you're good, man. Well, no internet though. What? We might have to really look at yours. We're recording on my side because we're sitting in so whenever.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, now it's connected. It just took a minute to get on. It'll work.
It just took a minute. I don't know why.
It's a trade of minutes, that's why.
Right?
These IT's like, I better get these phones.
Good.
Oh, yeah. I'm good.
Change the weather?
No, I.
Freaking right.
Really.
So Ellen's gonna say, yeah, we're good. Let me know when we're ready.
We're ready.
We're ready. Hey, welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. This is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. Thank you all for being here. My name is Mike Wickers, Mayor of Cottonwood Heights. First item on our agenda today is a review of our business meeting agenda for this evening. So we actually have two acknowledgements before we start. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance like always. Matt, if you'll lead us, I'd appreciate that.
Yep.
And then we'll go on to two different acknowledgements before we go to citizen comments. The first one being a proclamation 2023-01, acknowledging the life-saving efforts of Cottonwood Heights Police and Unified Fire Authority on August 16, 2023. Most of us know the accident that occurred at the freeway entrance or the freeway exit from I-215. And the life-saving heroic efforts of our police department and the Unified Fire Authority. So we wanted to acknowledge them for a while. Today we were to confirmation that some of the UFA employees could be here with us. So along with them and some of our police officers, we will be reading this proclamation and then giving all of our officers a copy of that proclamation as well, of all of the everyone that can attend that was part of that. So that is something I'm looking forward to. Hopefully you all will as well. The next item is 3.2, which is the presentation of beautification awards. Every year we go and reward residents and businesses of that are taking advantage of the xeriscaping, of water conservation, and making their properties beautiful. So it's a fun opportunity that we get to look at some of the things that some of our residents have done and then present an award. Mike, you'll be presenting that, right?
Yeah, I'll just introduce each property. We have a certificate and a gift card for each of the winners. So I'll just
show a picture of the winning property and then turn it over to each of you to just say a couple things and we'll go from there.
So we'll plan on as they come up, I'll come and be in the picture. If you're the one that voted, why don't you be in the picture as well, if that works? And we'll come up, do a picture, then you can do the next one.
Has
Yeah.
every winner confirmed that they're coming tonight?
No, they haven't. So we didn't have the name of every winner this year. We took the award signs to each of their properties and left a letter on their door inviting them to be here, but I don't have confirmation, so we just have to kind of see.
It might just be us telling who they
Yeah.
are. Yep, if nobody's there. If they are here, we'll do pictures and.
Yep.
Yep, perfect. Okay, and then we'll move on to our normal citizen comment period. And then the council has 4 legislative items to consider tonight. First being the long-awaited sleds ordinance update. So I think we're gonna push this one more meeting.
Yeah.
I come to see it. So we will
Rude,
we're-
cruel.
I'll actually have you.
Didn't you find out, you got a concealed carry the other day?
I thought I see a smile. I think I saw, anger coming out of his eyes as soon as I said that. So Mike, do you want to address anything before we do that?
So the minor changes that were made last time that were discussed, that updated ordinance has been posted on the website, kind of untouched for the last couple of weeks. The FAQ sheet did go out in the October newsletter. I think you got one email that was sent to each of you over the past couple of weeks as a public comment. The one comment that was made in the meeting that I think there was some question on is, what if there's a case where the top of the bank is like a really gradual slope up and there's kind of a weird condition? How do you base the measurement there? There's a section in the code for minor modifications that basically says if there's a weird condition, like we understand there's always going to be that example property that the code doesn't apply well to. There's a modification section that allows us to look at those. So I think everything's covered. We think there's pretty good consensus on it and it's ready to go.
And Mayor, if it's appropriate, I think it'd be nice to, if we get additional comments tonight and questions, if we could have them go up and answer some of those would be super helpful.
Sure. Happy to.
We'll plan on it. Appreciate Mike's hard work on this.
Salt Lake County Flood Control probably has somewhere in there stuff of how to determine where the bank is or was or.
Yeah.
Things like that.
The definition of that largely matches theirs. We're on the same page. It's just, you get a weird case and you have to actually apply it. Sometimes that's a little awkward and we've built language in for that.
Okay, great. Before I move on, I want to recognize our city manager, Tim Hingy, who's online with us. He's at a conference. And then our attorney, Shane Topham, who's recovering. So we're so grateful to have them both online, and Councilmember Burrell just joined us. So the next item for this evening will be item 5.2, which is consideration of ordinance 404, adopting an amended budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. So this is actually going to be something we're going to discuss in a staff report. So we're not going to talk about it here, but we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. Item 5.3, consideration of resolution 2023-49, accepting requests for indemnification. So we will discuss this now. Let me, if our attorney Shane Topham can hear, why don't I have him unmute and tell us a little bit more about the indemnification request for this item.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. The city, a city employee, Sergeant Thomas Doherty of the Conwood Heights Police Department, filed an EEOC complaint against the city some months ago, and that has gone through the EEOC process and was determined by the decision makers in there that it did not have merit, but Sergeant Doherty decided to go ahead and file suit against the city in federal district court. And so the city has been named, as well as City Manager Kingy and Chief Russo, and I believe Assistant Chief Bretterman. So because those individual employees of the city have been named in their capacities as city employees for work that they did on behalf of the city, they're entitled to request indemnification from defense and indemnification from the city concerning the lawsuit, and that is what they have done. And so the city council now is being asked to approve those requests for defense and indemnification. As I've explained before, under the Utah Governmental Immunity Act, there really isn't any sort of basis for the city to, it's a general rule, to deny defense and indemnity to employees who are sued in their capacity as city employees. We have built into this resolution by the city council accepting the request for indemnification that if it turns out that actions complained of in the complaint in this lawsuit are turn out to have been outside the course and scope of these employees' job functions, why then the indemnification doesn't reach that far. So this was what will be before you in the business meeting concerning the indemnification.
Thank you, Shane. Any questions, comments? Okay. Our last action item for this evening will be consideration of resolution 2023-50, declaring certain property surplus. So I know our administrative fiscal services director, Scott Georges, wrote this. Scott, anything you want to add? And Chief Russo, you can add to it as well if you want. Okay.
There's basically 3 items. One is a vehicle, a 2018 Nissan Armada with 43,000, almost 44,000 miles. And then 2 pieces of exercise equipment, free motion EXT dual cable cross and free motion treadmill that are being recommended for surplus and being recommended that we utilize the KSL.com classifieds marketplace to try and dispose of those items should the council approve these items for disposal.
Great. Chief, anything?
Yeah, we're looking to surplus the truck to help fund the purchase of a new line vehicle, a newer truck to take its place. And the exercise equipment was in the room that, as you know, we are converting into a nursery for some of our female employees to use. And so I've moved that out and painted and carpeted. I have some cool furniture coming, but we thought they would work out there. They don't, but so you know, when we originally purchased the equipment, the union paid for about 60-70% of it, and then the city paid the remaining part of it. But we're just looking to surplus it and take the proceeds and return it all to the city to use however you see fit.
Great. Questions, comments, council? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So we will move on to item 3, our staff reports. Item 3A specifically, we'll start with a continuation of our last meeting's discussion on a proposed budget amendment. And our administrative and fiscal services director, Scott Georges, will bring us back up to speed, and we'll then have a discussion about items we want to include or exclude.
All right. Let me share my screen really quick here. Right, so again, the items that are in green are rebudgets of items that were in our prior year budget that are being carried forward. And then items that are not in green are in essence new items. Some have been talked about before, some have not. Some have revenue offsets and some do not, but we'll just go through them. Item number 1 is police radios. We were budgeted in our last fiscal year for $50,000, and we're carrying that forward because the availability of those radios was not there last year, and we want to utilize that for the current year. Item number 2 is $175,000 to go towards finishing, if you will, the purchase of those radios so that we're going to be in compliance with their new requirement by the time we go into springtime, which is when the tentative time is that we're going to switch to the new radio frequencies that will require that.
Scott, I just a clarifying question. The ones that are in green were just need to be rebudgeted as from a cash perspective. it's not a net expense out from the budget. It would have just.
Acquisition wasn't done in time,
The
basically.
acquisition wasn't done.
So-
So that money did flow to our fund balance and now
Right,
it's going to be
and it's
pulled
taken back out, so-
out of the fund balance with this reappropriation.
So the net effect over the 2 years is not a negative 50,000 or other, it's more of a zero.
Well, we didn't, it's money that we would have taken out of last year had the expense been able to go through. However, since we weren't able to make that expense did not occur last year. And now we're asking to make that expense in the current year's budget.
So does the 225,000, will that cover everything then for the police radios?
Does that include the 50?
50
Yeah,
plus
it-
one
So is it 50 plus 175, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It should, there'll be a couple extras. That we weren't anticipating given the traffic unit, but yes.
Okay.
and then there's in the traffic unit, and we'll talk about that. There's some radios included down there too, as well. Item number 3 is police marathon overtime, and this is the marathon that just occurred for $6,305 of overtime, and they reimbursed us for that, so there's no direct impact on our budget or fund balance on that. Item number 4 is police DUI shift reimbursement. It's actually 2 different items for $7,476 and $3,382. Again, that's already been reimbursed to us, so there's no direct impact on our budgets for those 2 items. Item number 5 is the sale of a Harley Davidson motorcycle from the police department and being asked to utilize those funds again to go towards the purchase of another vehicle there in the police department. Item number 6. Now, this item is the request for 3 additional patrol officers, the traffic unit, as the chief has mentioned. The adjustment is specifically for 120,000 times 3. So that would be 360,000 plus 40,000 for an additional vehicle, plus 18,000 for additional radios. It's about 6,000 between the handheld radio and the car radio per officer to get that taken care of. So the total of this is a $418,000 adjustment. Now, these are annual numbers. So if we didn't say put this into place until say January of 2024, then in essence, it could be cut not in half. The 120 times 3 could be cut in half, but we would need the 40,000 for the additional vehicle and the 18,000 for the radios in order to cover that. But this is at your direction. You can direct us to do whatever it is you'd like, whether you'd like us, whether we would identified some financial or some revenue offsets to these, or whether we would like to, adjust the timing of this and so on and so forth. That's at your discretion. So you instruct us what you would like to do on that accordingly.
So if it's a 6-month cost, it would be $180,000 left. It was a
180 plus 40, so 220 plus 18, so 238 would be the half year amount. Because you have to have the vehicle and the radio.
Yeah, that doesn't go away. And then it's another 90 if you made it effective immediately, because that would be another 3 months.
Yeah, you're right.
another quarter.
You made it effective immediately. Yeah.
So that's 318. That's this year, but annually going forward, it would be the 400.
So
Yeah.
before we move on, let me give a little bit of background for funding options that we have. I think Chief mentioned in our last meeting, there's some opportunity to offset some of the cost with possible retirement, some that have happened, some that are possibly will happen. We can't count on that, but that's an option, depending upon who we hire, their stage in their career to offset part of that cost. The other update that I wanted to give you was from, I requested the county and UDOT that perhaps because we would be patrolling Wasatch Boulevard, we would participate in a tread inspection for the canyons when those announcements come out that they can't go up without that, we're looking for funding. So to give you an update, Carlos Braceros mentioned that he was going to include a $500,000 into his budget for us, Sandy, and the sheriff's office. So we would probably be looking in the $200,000 range for that would come from UDOT. Now, just because Carlos puts it into his budget doesn't mean anything. So let me tell you the process that's gonna have to go through. In November, the governor's office will decide whether or not they want to include his request into his budget. So we'll know sometime in November if that happens. That also means literally nothing. Okay, so just because the governor puts it into his budget doesn't mean anything. Wherever hits the road comes during the legislative session as the legislature decides whether or not to fund the UDOT's full request, including this Wasatch Boulevard, help to mitigate traffic. So the chances, there's not really a way for me to tell you whether or not that will all happen. There's, I think there's a good chance that the fact that UDOT was willing to put that into their budget request is a big positive. I think, there's a good chance that we could see the governor include it. They understand that the issues on Wasatch Boulevard, and they realize that this would also help alleviate cars getting up into the canyon on days that they shouldn't with bad traction. And then also I think the legislature would understand. That doesn't mean that it's going to get funded, but the soonest that it would get funded would be July 1st, 2024. So if we went ahead with this budget adjustment and got funded July 1st, 2024, we would be able to possibly offset somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple $100 million for this request.
That would be the next.
There's a lot of
next
this.
budget year.
Yes.
So, I understand, will it be in the legislature, it may continue, or
I mean, we would know if it was funded by March. We just wouldn't get the money
Correct.
until July.
Correct.
So is the question of doing this now, or is this a question of doing it this next year?
So the problem is if we don't do it now,
The winter's coming.
winter coming. So I was in a meeting yesterday with the Central Wasatch Commission. The board meets. We had UTA come in. UTA is not going to make any changes to the buses from last year, which means they're still going to run at 30 minutes instead of every 15. They're not going to add the route back in. So there will be zero help again from UTA to alleviate traffic on Wasatch Boulevard, which is very, very disappointing.
If I may, Mayor, it might be of interest to the council. At the UTA Local Advisory Council meeting a week ago, Carlton Christensen did indicate that one improvement that they haven't figured out entirely how they're going to swing it to improve is that they are using longer buses that will have
Correct.
a higher capacity, and they're going to possibly do what's called a surge, which means at peak hours, they would send along a secondary bus behind the scheduled bus so that when it fills up, then, those trying to use the bus service up Little Cotton Canyon can go into the secondary bus. I tried to get more details. He said he would have them by the end of October. So a small glimmer of improvement, not nearly adequate. I just wanted the council to be aware of that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you mentioning that because I heard those yesterday as well. The other thing that there might be another small item that can help is UTA has asked the resorts to not have their employees on public transportation. They're looking for them to go on shuttles, which would alleviate the buses filling up as quickly as well. So maybe putting
I thought, okay, their own arrangements or the van pools,
the van pools.
they don't consider that public transportation.
Well, they don't. Yeah, they don't consider it the buses. So
Well,
leaving more room for people on the buses,
I-
and that could be a help. You
I
never
think
know.
they also have subsidy money that they can use for ordering Le Bus, a private bus company to help with employee transfers.
What would be the temperature from everyone about in chief, a phased approach, looking at that legislative decision making taking place? Say maybe one officer at this time, and then if that comes to fruition, we can even, if we go back to this budget, that's fine, but at least having one additional officer hired and, integrated into the system prior to that time.
Let's talk to chief 1, 2, or the full
Yeah.
amount. Yeah, let's get your opinion.
But the problem is if you do that, then the expectation is going to be that we are up there and we're solving those problems
Mm.
up there, and it won't be realistic. And we're setting them up for failure.
Okay,
And
that's
that's
what
the
I
problem.
wanted, that's what I wanted
I,
to kinda hear.
I get it, and that sounds fiscally responsible. It's just,
The reality.
the reality is that you can't do it with. It just.
I definitely don't want UDOT to be in a position where they say, well, they're doing it, they're solving it, and they're paying for it. Now, they're still gonna go into the budget. I mean, we have people that we hire to for these things for this purpose. We just need to make sure that they spearhead and make sure that that funding gets funded by the legislature.
Well,
I agree. That's a good point.
So,
UDOT wants us to check tires. I'm not checking tires until they kick in the money for us to do it.
Mhm.
They want us to do the tire checks at the canyon. That takes at least 2 people to do
there
it.
we go. I'm good with that.
So.
That's excellent.
However,
You don't want to remove this.
No,
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
One of the things, as you all know, and I just want to reiterate, having these 3 officers will definitely help and be an important contribution to this. But the complexity of the traffic issues, this is not, as we would say, this is not going to resolve the issues. It's going to help mitigate it, and it will help us do our part. But I don't want there to be the expectation that, and Chief, you can address this as well, that having these 3 officers is going to solve the problems. It's not. It's going to help mitigate. And I just want to make sure there's that expectation that once we do get the officers, if it's funded, that it's going to definitely help. It's going to be something that we can do, but it's not going to alleviate all the issues that we have. That's too big of an issue.
Yeah. So what Sandy was able to do, they were able to do because of traffic enforcement. And so Sandy's complaints almost completely stopped at the middle end of July when they sent their officers up and changed that. So Tim's right. This doesn't mean that, but this would provide manpower to let our residents know. We'll ticket people blocking driveways and we can help push people to the sides and do all the things that can help and to know that we're actually trying to do something. So anyway.
well, and 2, I think, are we aware that there is a local decal program in place? I mean, when they've tried this before, the local decals were supposed to be being issued in November and December, so that at least your officers wouldn't be checking, if the car had the decal in their windshield, they get flagged right up the canyon. But if they don't, and that decal program, even years ago, frankly, was not functional. They ran out of decals at the local tire stores by early December. So I guess a question I would have is, has UDOT, if they're going to support us and work with us, are they already, do they have a plan in place that they're going to launch that's going to be functional in the way of issuing decals well in advance of the Christmas holiday, which is really the beginning of this seasonal
So
thing?
Councilor Burrell, let me add what I know currently. They are continuing the decal program. The reason it doesn't work is because nobody's checking. And so why would you get a decal if
Well,
everybody goes
respectfully,
up?
I can tell you when it didn't work before, it's because they literally ran out of decals in the first week in December. So it was a dysfunctional beyond just not being checked. The issuance of the decals for locals was discontinued in early December. So
From what I understood, the amount of decals would not be a problem this year. If you're checking, it's not going to sell out before. People are going to get turned around and then they're going to go, oh, I'm going to go get my new tires and go get my decal. And then I won't even have to be stopped next time. So that's not for us to implement, but it's a good point that you made. Yes, go
I
ahead.
want to make sure we keep in mind also the other issues we're having on our streets. We talked about an email about the 2300 East and those issues. We're talking about Wasatch or Fort Union Boulevard, the complaints that we're getting from residents about speed there and on Highland. These officers will be able to help with that aside from just the winter issues.
Absolutely, and
Yeah, so
that is a real
That's a
issue.
huge.
Yeah, it's a big one. When we talk about safety on our streets, this is how we address those things directly.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten more complaints than people complaining about speeding. That is, I mean, we're probably all in
Yeah.
the same boat.
We admit.
And if that helps, it's a huge deal.
So I think we can
And
justify.
I echo what both the councilmen here have
Yeah.
said. I so echo that.
Yeah, 100%.
Councilmember Bracken, anything you want to add?
I do have a question. I don't quite. I mean, I'm looking at this final number. I don't quite understand the actual impact to the budget and how that. Really. If it puts us in a really tough position or not,
On just this one item,
the police, correct? Yeah.
yeah, so just this one item for the current year would add $418,000 of additional expense. Sounds
That would
like,
be
Down,
300.
yeah, that'd be not quite so much.
well,
318,
it would back out, yeah, so it would back out, roughly 30,000 times three, $90,000 out of this. So it would be, $328,000.
I guess I'm asking, do we have the money? That's what I'm asking.
Well, for the current year, yeah, we're in a stage where we're burning down the budget, from the perspective of our budget. Our beginning fund balance is being eroded, each and every year. And then, this would compound out in the future years. So, we have to keep that in mind because that can affect the timing of when you need to do a tax increase. You know what I mean? Because the only way to really go and affect our revenues is a tax increase.
So there's a couple things to add to that. Thank you, Scott. If we don't get UDOT funding, we would reconsider this. So we could end up with retirements and with
We'll see where it all shakes
UDOT
out.
help, we could end up with zero cost to the budget, really. If we got a couple hundred and some savings from some retirements, we could literally end up with a zero impact to our budget. Now, it's not on paper, so
But won't that still impact our service levels? With folks retiring, we won't have. Yeah, increase in price.
It's somebody retiring at the high end of the pay scale and hiring somebody in the lower end of the pay scale. So you get incremental savings to that. I usually term that turnover savings, but it's all dependent on who you hire to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
And so until that occurs, it's hard to really know the impact that that's going to have.
Yeah.
Because it totally depends on who you hire.
Yeah, we want to hire the best, right? So,
Yeah.
And some of them might be laterals, of course, you're gonna be laterals, and they might have a lot of experience, you're gonna be hiring them at a higher
yeah.
rate too, but something to consider too is. What you're paying for is the issues on Wasatch and that mitigation, but you're also paying for what you kind of hit on with this. There's a quality of life issue here and safety, not just speeders, aggressive drivers, uninsured motorists, and that's not a big deal until it's your car that gets hit. And so there's a lot of, this is an important issue, and that's where the money's going, and this is what we're paying.
But Chief, I do believe in past weeks you've said these are positions that you once had,
They were,
right? And so for me, just to be transparent, I think I'm more in favor of it for that reason alone. There were decisions that were made in the past of where the staffing level should be to mitigate speeding and other issues. With other positions going forward, I think this is all departments. I'd want to look for some way to, instead of continuing to add to the budget, look for some other offsets or other things. But knowing that you've already had these positions, you were downgraded and we're maybe taking you back to where you were, I'd be supportive of it.
And I think those improvements in service levels are critical. Response times.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those types of things that come into play would definitely be impacted.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we're hearing.
those are the things we're most proud of.
Mhm.
So, like, that's why we won going to this point.
Yeah, you're doing great, Chief.
How many open spots do we currently have?
Oh, I actually terminated one person within a couple days ago, and then we had a retirement today. So I'm down 2 people, but we already had recruitment open. So we have applications, and I assure you there are interested officers from other agencies listening to this very conversation.
What is our turnover? How many officers do you see replaced with new officers each year?
Well,
Is it
if
like-
you would have asked me that a couple of years ago, we lost a lot of officers, but with this new council, people come here and they don't leave. They want to be here and they love it here. So I would tell you that I don't expect to lose a lot of people. Um,
And the reason I asked is if for some reason it becomes financially unviable, I mean, I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying, but I'm also pointing out
well, I-
that naturally letting that take place if you decide to reduce the FTEs is a lot easier than telling someone we just don't have a space for it anymore. I really hate to get into that position, so I just want the council to be conscious that that's part of that decision as well.
and I can answer that, because there are several employees that we have currently that are aging out, that are getting to the top of and getting close to retirement. And so there probably would be a natural attrition of them retiring. Without going into any detail, so leave it at that.
But I would say potential funding, we didn't show up till next budget year, so what you're really looking at is the $328,000 drawn fund balance.
For the remainder of the fiscal year.
Not necessarily, because the if the retirements happen, November,
Those
you're
would
not-
be the natural course of business, they may happen either way, but. I don't mean to sound like I'm poo-pooing the idea, I'm not. I just,
No, you're trying to explain it.
I just want to make sure that, for clarity's sake, that we understand what's going down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when we get to the bottom, this is the softball to get you back on track. We're at 700 and 400 of it is this one item, so.
So we need a majority on this item to determine to go
It
forward.
has my support.
Are we looking at today, the last quarter of this year, or are we looking for January?
We're voting on this today.
Well,
I think effective immediately. Is that, yeah, effective immediately.
which to me makes more sense, because if you're gonna have people up and going before the snow really starts to fly, you need to.
It has to happen now. That's what we hope to do. So we've got one affirmative,
I'm good.
2, 3. Okay. We'll conclude this.
Will we adjust that number to,
So you want me to adjust it down to
Yes.
the 328 for
Yes.
today, and then knowing that it would go up. Barring any
For this next
additional
fiscal year.
revenues, it would go up again for next year, but we'll look at that revenue.
We'll reevaluate.
When that comes and go through the budget process. Okay.
So Scott, why don't you move on to the next item?
Yep. Now, item number 7 is the South Valley Chamber membership. That would be $20,000 in order to join there.
So this is so actually, this is our next budget item, or this is our next staff report. So don't worry about it. We'll finish this discussion and then we'll come back to it.
And then item number 8 is 2 VMS board trailers. That's the one trailers you put out that have the messages on 2 or 3 lines where you can put messages out. They're 18,500 a piece, so 37,000 total for those. That allows us to communicate to the drivers in certain areas about different things that are going on.
So this is listed under Public Works. Do you envision police using this at all?
it's both,
Both?
it's for mainly in the winter for the canyons. And then for construction areas we might be working in.
Oh, cool. And then if you flip to the back side of that sheet, there's capital projects fund. There's the 2 items there, the rebudget of our mainly road and also trail capital items of $4,605,000, and then revenue of $1,209,000. And that's all in the fund balance that we would be utilizing. And then also the rebudget of the unfinished public works building, just a little bit more than $7 million. And then one new item, which is the Fort Union Wasatch Boulevard curb and median up by the 7-Eleven. That would be a $35,000 payment to UDOT, who would actually do that work for us on that particular item. And then on the stormwater fund, it's rebudget of the unfinished stormwater projects from the year of about $1,528,000. And all of those things are items that were budgeted last year, funded last year, and just weren't complete during the year. And we expect this pretty much every year.
Did they show up in the ending year fund balance?
Yeah, it just flows into the fund balance because it didn't get
But,
expended last year, and then we.
Our end of
budgeted-
year fund balance
Yep.
would show these funds
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
And is that because project just took longer, or we decided
Yeah.
not to.
We budget them in their entirety, but in the reality, when we try and go out, we have to time the projects with certain things. And or we get delayed on certain things. The Public Works building, we knew that was gonna be a multi-year thing, and so timing often just can't happen within the course of a year when we're doing that. A lot of times when the budget goes in place in July, they start to get bids and things, and they can't actually start on that project till spring. So you might just spend a little bit on it, and then the full force of that project comes in the latter part of the
Are
summer.
we earning revenue on the
Yeah,
bond money? We are.
on the bond money and on these unfinished projects, we're earning money, interest money on both of those.
Okay.
So,
Point of clarification, back on the item of the Fort Union Boulevard, Wasatch Boulevard, what's being called the curb and median. Is that strictly the, what I understood it to be more of an island as opposed to a median? So this is as you come out of the 7-Eleven on the north side of the 7-Eleven. It would be for the right-hand turners, it would be to force anybody coming out of the 7-Eleven, they would have to stay in the right-hand lane and turn to the right.
7-Eleven will be right in, right out. Off Fort Union, and then left, right in, right out. A full intersection on Wasatch, but a right in on Fort Union.
Okay, and so would there truly be any kind of median
Yeah, it's a
between the
raised,
two?
it's a raised concrete barrier.
So this is so you can't come out of 7, turn left.
Correct.
Is it
And
where Einstein's is, right? You're going left, going west. You can't do that.
Yeah.
I can show this.
Well, you mean
Einstein.
Alpha Coffee or?
Alpha, Einstein.
Alpha, sorry,
Oh.
Alpha.
Can you pull up
Yeah.
the,
Okay.
so you can see where it's painted out. You can see the blue. See the blue lines there? It's in essence in that spot. Mainly, this is for traffic going up Big Cottonwood Canyon in the winter, if you'll recall. What they'll do is they'll come up and they'll create their own lane,
Yeah.
and they'll try to stuff 2 lanes into 1 lane going up Big Cottonwood.
That's right. That's right.
We manage this right now. There's already not a left turn out of there because of the striping. It's already illegal to cross those, but it happens. And in the winter, we put up candlestick poles, and those usually get driven over and plowed over. So the idea is to put up the barrier, the concrete barrier.
So you're saying that additionally, there'll be some kind of median?
No, it's
So
just
the
this is
35,000
blue
is
is
strictly
it's for that
still this
triangle, correct.
Wasn't there also some kind of mitigation on the other side?
That's a UDOT project. It's the same, they'll be doing it in conjunction with this, but UDOT's paying that portion of it.
Right, and do they,
That right there. What's already up there, those candlestick poles.
So this is to add to their project that they're doing, so their
Correct.
subcontractors are all mobilized in one spot doing the
Correct.
whole thing.
another real hot spot that I just want to mention quickly, since we're in the mines discussion here, is that it's a real problem on this east side of the 7-Eleven where cars are try to turn in, but if somebody is coming out, they come to a complete stop where cars are coming from the north at 50 miles an hour through there. This is a real time bomb here.
UDOT's gonna have to,
It's a
Yeah,
UDOT
change
issue,
that,
but we need, I think, as a municipality to really come forward and do something about this situation before there is a super serious. There's a lot of fender benders that go on in this whole area. And God forbid, it's a mild day and we have any bicyclist or pedestrian also affected by cars crashing in this area.
So, Matt,
related to coming in and out of the 7-Eleven.
to remove a public access easement onto that property. If the property owner doesn't allow it, it would have to condemn it to do so, correct, from UDOT?
Yeah, UDOT would have to, they probably are, I don't want to speak for UDOT, but I'm guessing they got a grandfathered access onto that, and they would have to work with UDOT to change, maybe combine their 2 accesses or combine those 2 accesses, but that would definitely be a UDOT call.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Bro, that access causes accidents, so, yeah. Thanks. Okay, anything else?
No, that's it. And so based on the decision of, well, I'll definitely reduce the police one down 90,000, and then based on this next discussion, I'll do what needs to happen with The
chamber.
spelling chamber, and then republish the document, have it ready tonight, so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Related to this, before we get to the next one, there, we had discussions of telecom, and that could be a potential other source.
Yeah, that's, I'll put that on the next agenda. How's that? I think I actually have it on either the next one or the following. Tim, you might, I don't know. Is that telecom on our next meeting or our next following meeting?
You're on mute, Tim.
Sorry, we were gonna do it the second meeting of October or the first meeting in November.
Okay, yep. So it'll be an agenda item coming up. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Item B, 3B is also a continuing discussion that the council has had regarding whether or not to join the South Valley Chamber of Commerce, along with the city of Sandy, Draper, Riverton, and South Jordan, who currently are in that chamber. The council's asked for staff to follow up on a couple of specific issues, and so I'm just going to turn the time over to our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, to tell us where we're at.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'll just give a brief update from the last time we brought this forward. A quick summary of where we're at in terms of a contract proposal, and then the benefits that have now been stipulated in a draft contract that we're reviewing right now. That's a 3-year contract. The price goes up $5,000 a year, starting at $20,000 for the first year, $25,000 for the next, $30,000 for the third year. These are the stipulated, I guess we call them benefits that are that the chamber has offered. Businesses get a reduced rate with the city being involved no matter what, and they have offered an additional reduction of $250 off the business membership for the first year. So that's a 50% discount based on what businesses would typically need to pay, $500. And they have different levels of membership, so the prices scale, but this is kind of the middle of the road membership. 50% discount on business accelerator courses for city businesses. We have had a few that have participated in that before, and I think have found it helpful. And then seats on a bunch of boards and committees, ex officio seats on the board of directors, the seat on the public policy committee and the women in business committee, registrations to monthly women in business lunches.
2 registrations. So,
2 registrations.
So 2 businesses would get.
It can be, yeah, city staff or businesses or whoever.
Okay.
And Jay also said, just to clarify on that women in business one, that all businesses in Cottonwood Heights get 50% off any business women in business event for the first year as well, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think the discount here applies not only to the membership, but also to the women in business, but I think
Lunches,
other events as well
yeah.
for that first year. Yeah. Some sponsorships at golf tournaments, member pricing for chamber activities, seating at their awards banquet. And then this one is kind of interesting, 10 of their kind of basic business memberships, but
Can I speak to that one real quick?
Yeah, please.
So I called Jay and asked him, I said, look, if the city's going to be putting money into this, I really want to be able to give some of these businesses that frankly don't have the finances to become members. And I do think it'd be nice to have these be really legitimate small businesses that are not the big dogs in the city, but maybe Cottonwood Cafe, I'm just throwing that out as an example, or, you know, various small businesses that wouldn't normally pay that fee. And every year we would have 10 to give to businesses every single year.
Yeah.
And I think that at least for me, made a big difference. So.
Yeah, that's a great one. And they have done a few things like this. They've offered some scholarships to their accelerator courses before that we have had businesses take advantage of. And then just titles, presidential sustaining partner title for the city, links to city resources through the chamber website. So this is kind of their offer to benefit local businesses, especially the very small ones that may not normally participate. It gives them a chance to. It puts the city on a bunch of boards and committees, which again, hopefully would help shift some of the priorities to make sure Cottonwood Heights and its needs are accounted for. And then we sent out a survey to a lot of businesses, in the hundreds of businesses. We got 18 responses, which is fairly typical to be expected. But the responses, those were emailed to the council earlier this week. They range from yeah or no, just one word responses, to some good feedback. You know, I tallied it up. Of the 18, about 12 or 13 of them were positive. There were 2 or 3 that were specifically negative, and a few that were like, yeah, it could be good. I'd want to see how it directly benefits me. So small sample size, but a positive response. And then a few businesses have been members of the chamber previously, just separate from the city's membership, and seem to have found benefit in being members. So that's where it is right now. I know it's in the budget amendment consideration. We would come back with an actual contract between the city and the South Valley Chamber, probably at the next meeting, dependent on the feedback we get here.
For those residents that are listening and folks that don't realize that there's a lot of benefits for the city when we go out and we're recruiting businesses to come in here, which helps to mitigate our taxes for our residents, because it's based on sales tax. And that's something that we, these chambers do a really good job of helping with those connections to be able to make that. And that's a return on investment as well.
Has the Bureau, or has the chamber, South Valley Chamber, ever actually shown return on investment, so to speak? That is to say, when cities are shelling out, like in this case, it'd be $75,000 over a 3-year period of time. What businesses have come into their city that they can attribute, to the Chamber of Commerce exposure?
I don't know specifically, but I work very closely with the Salt Lake Chamber, and the connection with the Salt Lake Chamber and the Economic Development Corp of Utah, created opportunities for businesses for the municipalities that were members. And that is some of the work that's done behind the scenes. I'm not privy to that information.
So another example I would say is, so when I worked at the Utah Manufacturers Association, it's a trade association, okay? And Stadler Rail was a company that came in out of Switzerland, and they wanted to know, was there a local industry organization that at least showed that there was interest in a specific industry, right? And so they came and met with us, and their headquarters for America are actually here in Utah, right? So you could not point it to just the Manufacturers Association. The reason they came here, it's kind of a holistic approach.
Presentation.
Well, I didn't want to.
Didn't Stadler come in conjunction with the knowledge that there was going to be a push towards some kind of rail up Little Cotton Canyon? To my
No.
what time frame was Stadler?
Stadler came here in 2015.
Yeah, and they came in through MEP to start with here into the state. And MEP had a what is it? It's kind of like the Shark Tank. And I was one of the people that did a presentation. There was a number of us that did presentations to them, explaining to them the benefits of coming here to the state.
The job that they closed, the contract that they closed was actually Cal Rail.
Yeah.
So it's a California job, but they wanted to build it here. So it wasn't related to that. But anyway, I think the point that I think maybe we're both trying to make is it's just showing, and frankly, the return, I know that it's $500 for a business to join. 10 free memberships is $5,000. So that's $5,000 that the city gives to give back to specific businesses that otherwise don't have the financial resources. And that's a pretty big deal.
One of the other things that is a little bit hard to identify benefit, but through statistics or metrics is the networking opportunities that those that involve themselves in the chamber get, whether it's a direct benefit to their business, whether it's mentorship, but there's networking that happens in these events that I've been a witness to in multiple chambers. So I think it's another positive.
Mayor, may I add something as well?
Yes.
It just is kind of adding to what all of you have said. I kind of felt like with the chamber presence is a conduit that really helps in economic development. It's part of that team to help in recruiting. They may not provide any direct benefit on that, but one of the big points of a chamber is to focus on retention. It's that retention element that that a chamber really can strengthen existing businesses, help provide those connections, Mayor, as you just mentioned. So it's really a retention tool along with a conduit to help with the economic development, bringing businesses in, if that makes sense.
Great point.
What the impact on the CHBA? What do we?
In talking with them, we've been very clear that we want this to be additive to what the CHB is doing. So the CHB is geared, it's a free service geared towards the very small businesses that, you know, absent the free memberships in this proposal, typically wouldn't participate in a large chamber like this. Certainly we're there for the big businesses as well. They're a little more autonomous and plugged in more regionally. So we would still do the city events and the sponsorships and the highlights in city newsletters and ribbon cuttings and grand openings and the quarterly luncheons and all that stuff.
Well, I guess from what I can wrap my arms around here, having been to some of the luncheons, I believe there was there 2 in this calendar year? They're not really quarterly, right? They occur times a year.
Handful of times a year.
Right. You know, I'm having a little trouble with the efficacy of spending this kind of money over the next 3 years. Is if a survey was sent out to hundreds of businesses and there were only 18 replies, which was mixed, although some positive, this idea of issuing 10 memberships that would be valued and utilized by small businesses, I'm having a little trouble with the math on that. So in 3 years, there'd be 30 businesses, and yet only maybe a dozen even responded to the survey. And I think one of the things that I can understand about small businesses in Cottonwood Heights, such as Cottonwood Cafe, they are so struggling for employees. I can tell you that Alan, who co-owns the Cottonwood Cyclery, he's having to do a lot of the work himself as one of the business owners. They're so short-staffed. I don't know that they would really have the extra bandwidth and employee type of, those businesses are struggling just to have enough employees to keep their businesses going, from what I can understand as I interact with those business owners. So while I personally have been at Chamber of Commerce over my career in Salt Lake County, driving economic development into Salt Lake County via the hospitality industry and convention industry, I think that the bigger corporations benefit. And I could almost see maybe rationally, knowing that we have a full-time staff person, Hope, you know, running the CHBA within our staff, if it was going to grossly alleviate her burden and perhaps save the city some money in that way, I could see spending $75,000 over the next 3 years on this. But if we're going to continue to sustain the you know, full-time employee running CHBA, and we're not really alleviating any of that burden for the city, and then adding this additional expenditure, I don't know that that's the main function of government when we know that our resources for public health and safety are very limited. $75,000 would buy a number of crosswalks and safer modalities within our Cottonwood Heights roadways. So I'm, again, where if money was unlimited, I'd be all for it. But I think at this point, as I've evaluated it, I don't know if I can support this kind of expenditure.
Thank you for those thoughts. Councilman Bracken, anything that you'd like to add, or should we?
No, we've discussed various chamber memberships many times over the years, and the end result was CHBA, which I think served its purpose. I know that is not 100% of that's kind of an add-on responsibility. I don't know that getting away with it or discontinuing it we wouldn't lose the employee.
No, 90% of that position is business license administration and processing.
It's connected, and I expect this might actually add a little bit to that. So, you know, I honestly, on this one, I could probably go either way. It's always been a no in the past, but that doesn't mean it has to be. You know,
yeah.
If you feel like you see some benefit to it, then you know, Guess you have 3 years to find out.
I see another benefit is our CHBA interaction with the chamber,
That,
actually improving opportunities for us.
And I do know it's up to the CHBA to decide if they do want the chamber to alleviate some of their burden. With the ribbon cuttings, we could continue to do that here. I know that the chamber could also do those as well. So it's up to the staffer and what they feel most comfortable doing. And I really wanted, you know, my suggestion to them was have a proposal that fits everyone in our city. Have a proposal that fits someone who cannot even cover a basic membership. And there might be some companies that aren't interested because they don't have the staff, they don't have the time, and that's okay. Every business is at a different time, a different chapter in their career, but also be there for the companies that are really, really big. Because right now the big ones are looking to regional organizations that are outside of the city. And I just think that's a lost opportunity.
Yeah.
So
if I get it right, you're probably
I'd
in
be in
favor. Because we knew you would, and I would as well. So we will have that included in the budget amendment, Scott. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I
Go ahead.
also, so in addition to the budget amendment, we will need to bring forward a agreement that we actually have a draft that's been submitted by the chamber. So we'll have Shane review that, and that will need to come. You can move forward with the budget amendment, that's fine, but that will come forward at the next meeting as well for formal consideration, just FYI. And we'll incorporate these elements that Mike has placed on the screen into that agreement.
are those costs also just on date of signing, or is it a prorated to July 1st?
Yeah, that's actually good. I was actually just thinking the same thing. We ought to, I'd like it to go with our budget year, and I'm sure that they'd be amenable to doing that. So we could probably reduce that and prorate that. We'll have to talk with, before we do the contract anyway. I guess we could put the full amount in the budget amendment and return it if we decide to prorate. Does that sound good? Does that make sense?
I missed first
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we got it.
Put the 20 in, but it may, we may.
We may end up prorating.
We may adjust it down
Because
or
I-
negotiate. Maybe it's, instead of it's a year, maybe it's 15 or 18 months of the discounts or something like that.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I agree. It's something that makes sense to do on the budget
Budget.
year.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that discussion. Our last staff report continues a discussion that we've had actually 2 or 3 times, but the last discussion was during our retreat in January. So Matt, you weren't here. However, what I'd like to do to start this is to try and give you some background as much as possible about what this is and why we're talking about it and what it means. And it's not the most easy of topics. So if you can try and pay attention and ask questions is completely fine. So this discussion item is entitled an ordinance discussion on maintenance of private access easements. But I would add to that are owned publicly, so are by the city. So if you want to know what a private access easement is, when a development is started and a developer says, I want this to be a private road into our subdivision. Usually what happens, and I'm going to ask Tim and Shane, if I say anything incorrect, interrupt me, or you can add to the discussion as you feel entitled. But so when a developer decides he wants to do a private access easement, he can then create that easement at less standards that he would have to do if it was a public access easement. Okay, so anyway, so that's how private access easements come into being, most of them. So what has happened is we have, and I don't know if we have 6 private access easements in Conwood Heights that are owned by, the roads are actually owned by the city. The ground is owned by the city, and at least on Timberline, I don't know, maybe Tim, you'll know on the other 5, on Timberline, the top of Timberline, the reason that we actually own this private access easement is because the developer didn't pay his taxes. And so the county, at the time when it was unincorporated Salt Lake County, took the road back. So
Or they didn't sell it to somebody else, or nobody else wanted to buy it.
Why would what benefit would it be with the county to take?
So I agree with you. What should have happened in my mind is they should have leaned the property so that as anytime they wanted, any member of that HOA or within that private access easement, if you would have put a lien, and Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, you would put a lien for them to sell a home or to do anything, they would have to catch up on the taxes listed within the easement. But go, Shane, I can tell you want to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that what happened, you're absolutely correct up to the point where somebody didn't pay the property taxes on this private roadway, and it was either probably the developer, maybe it was an HOA that received the roadway from the developer when the development was completed, but likely the developer didn't pay taxes. And so what happens then, I think it's a matter of statute, is it goes to tax sale for six years, I believe is the period of time, 6 successive years. If nobody pays the property taxes, then it has to go to tax sale. And if nobody buys it, the county becomes the owner because of the unpaid taxes. So in this case, at least to my knowledge, there wasn't really an affirmative desire by Salt Lake County to own this. It just followed the statutory process for what happens when taxes aren't paid. And Salt Lake County became the owner because of the unpaid taxes. And then what happened, how the city became the owner is, I think it's probably been 10 or 12 years ago, if memory serves. Scott may remember this, but Salt Lake County approached the city and said, we have all of these, what they called remnant parcels. And
They forgot to turn over when we incorporated.
yeah, they forgot to turn over when we were incorporated, because the dedicated roadways passed by operation of law to a newly incorporated city. But these were little pieces that I think probably by and large Salt Lake County acquired through tax sale, and they wanted to transfer it over to the jurisdiction that now had jurisdiction on it, that now contained those things from a geography standpoint. So that's how the city became the owner of this piece. So
Is that also how we became the owner of all the other pieces, or?
I don't recall. There were 20 of them, or probably, maybe Scott.
Say 29.
But tonight
There
we're
were-
only addressing 6 of them.
Well,
Well, we're just addressing, I don't know, the mayor can explain what he wants.
So when we
some of those
have,
parcels were under Highland Drive. Some of those parcels were pieces of property here and there.
They weren't roadways.
Well, the one under Highland Drive was, but it was,
there's 5 others like this. They're about the similar length of.
So I'm just trying to understand, if you say there's more than the ones that we're addressing tonight, are they then non-roadway parcels, or are they some of them parcels that are roadways?
Yes, I can address that. They're non-roadway parcels. The 6 that we're talking about, or the examples we gave you, are the ones we identified that were access road elements.
they were currently being used to access private homes.
I guess I would just alert you to one other thing, just looking forward. And that is this, what happened on this Timberline Drive with it being a private roadway, expressly a private roadway originally, and that's how it was platted and that's how it was created. Then becoming owned by the public entity because of tax sale, which happens, in my view, automatically by statute. That could happen with any private roadway in the city, including, for example, Giverny, that has a whole system of private roadways, but it's owned by the developer, it's owned by the HOA. But I think, to me, the legal reality is if somebody quits paying the taxes on those roads, why then they could eventually become owned by a public entity, Salt Lake County, and then if the city agrees to take it. So anyway, just that's the only other thing I wanted to.
So Shane, you mentioned statutorily that's the process that has to be followed. is it not available to lien? I mean, state.
No, it gets, Mayor, I think that it gets liened automatically when taxes aren't paid. And that lien continues and it continues to grow. And if the taxes aren't paid in 6 years, why then I think it automatically goes to tax sale because that's the remedy at the back end. I don't think there can just be a lien that just sits there beyond the 6 years on the property. I think that ultimately a tax sale has to occur.
Could you give an example of a time that you know of that there was a tax sale of one of these kind of remnant parcels that was a roadway that sold to anybody something? I mean, what motivation? What I'm concerned about is the precedent we're setting here. And if an HOA was clever enough to say that they weren't going to pay it, and 6 years went by, then it goes up in an auction. Who has any entity ever bought one of these remnant parcels that is an access? It seems like it's going to go to the municipality.
I can't speak to whether that sort of investment would be attractive to a private owner but I think that what happens is when these lots are created that are served by a private roadway, part of the title that goes to the owners of those lots that are served by the roadway is an express easement over that roadway. And so from the property owner's perspective, they will always have an express easement over that roadway. And so anybody that was to buy that property, that roadway property at tax sale, is always going to take title subject to that access right, I believe.
They couldn't do much.
In your case, why would anybody ever buy it?
Why would anybody anywhere ever
Yeah.
buy the responsibility
So
and the
let me-
liabilities?
Yeah, so let me add a little bit more context. So thank you, Shane. I appreciate that. That was
You're
helpful.
welcome.
So let me tell you what is my biggest concern. So now we have a private access easement that we own. So I imagine, so I know that if the developer, a lot of times when the developer does what this guy did, they'll turn it over to an HOA. Eventually, that didn't happen. So this is not in the HOA. So the snow removal and maintenance of this road is being done by 5 of 6 residents. One resident says, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to add to the support of this. So if you think about liability, there's a fire hydrant on this private access easement. Who's liable? We are the owner of the road. So, and maybe Shane could add his expertise as well. But if something happened on this road for whatever reason, and who's going to get sued?
Yeah, Shane, you can add to this, but the only thing related to that access easement is under state law, they're required to maintain the access easement and it's still a private road element, even though we're the underlying property owner. Shane, you can address the liability side of things, but
They meaning the property owners.
Yeah, well,
They meaning the HOA, they meaning who? Developer?
The people that have the easement.
yeah, the general rule in Utah regarding maintenance of easements, which I think is what this would be viewed as from on a legal analysis, is that the users of the easement, whether it be the owner of what's called the dominant tenement, or which is in this case the city, or excuse me, the servient tenement would be the city, because its fee interest in the roadway is being subject to use by the lot owners, or the lot owners. It's allocated. The maintenance obligation is allocated based on their proportionate use of the property. So if you have 6 or 8 home sites that are being serviced by an access easement, and nobody, and the city isn't using it, I think that 100% of the maintenance obligation belongs to the property owners that are being serviced by the easement. That is not to say that if a lawsuit occurred, the city wouldn't get named, but in my view, at least, the city would have a pretty ironclad defense if the city hadn't been using the property for anything. Which I don't know what the city has ever done on this roadway. But if it hasn't done anything, why, I think that would be the defense of the city.
So one thing that the homeowner mentioned to me is they think that we slurry sealed it once. Matt, would you have any idea through your records to know if we
Not
did?
since I've been here. The
Okay.
county might have done it when they had it at one point. I don't know, but I don't have any records and the county doesn't.
Are you saying since you've worked at the city?
Since I've been here,
Entirety of the city? would
Since
we have
I've
a
been here,
record?
I can't speak 8 years prior. So I don't know.
And I, sorry, I have not memorized every public works.
Yeah.
And road work.
Sadly,
thing that
neither
I've
have
done
I.
in the city in 20 years.
There's a lot going on.
But, I mean, we've discussed this multiple times in the past, and this puts a slightly different color on it. In that, Shane's comment that you have Royal Lane down off of Creek Road, you have Javerne, you have other fairly sizable subdivisions that purposely chose to have private roads for whatever reason. There's all kinds of, there's dead ends, there's whatever, for whatever reason they've chosen. In this case, this road is quite a bit narrower. Usually when we adopted a public road and taken responsibility for it, it has been based on the assumption that it is built to city standards. I would hate to think that you set a precedent that where someone comes in and, I mean, Javerne is a lot bigger than what I was thinking. Royal Lane. They take care of their stuff. They know that they're supposed to. They have other privileges with private roads. They can close it. They want to have a parade on their road. They don't have to ask the city. They just, I assume, well, maybe the police have got something to say with that, but I assume that's not like closing a regular public road. That someone could come in, build it, and then just figure, well, in 6 years, the city's going to have to take it over and assume the maintenance and the liability and the plowing and everything else that's going on, especially roads that are narrow or windy. What's Forest Creek Lane? Is that the one that Doug lived on? That's another. It's a great big long, but it's a narrow lane. We deal with the tax sales, and we deal with on Whifford. This comes up, and they're doing an audit now on private lanes where they've been delivering garbage services, and they really shouldn't for safety and charter reasons. Because it's just, you take that big of a truck down a narrow lane like that, and it can be dangerous. So that precedent to me has always been a deciding factor on we're having the discussion with others about, well, I pay taxes, shouldn't I get the same service as everybody else? So to a point, yes, but to another point, we don't all use UTA, but we do pay for it. We don't always all call the police, but I don't think we're gonna prorate how much we use it by how much we're gonna get charged. It goes into the general fund. At some point, there needs to be that community pool.
Yeah. So, good comment, Scott. Any other thoughts?
Well, again, for me, it comes back to setting precedent. I obviously I don't want the city to take on the burden of, of someone walking to the end of Timber Lane as their usual walk, and something happens on that roadway, and then there's lawsuit, and it comes back to the city since we technically own it, even though Shane believes that our servient tenant status would not necessarily make us the, liable, or the buck wouldn't stop with us, so to speak. But it seems to me that we ought to look into, and I don't know if form-based code or other ways, there are other mechanisms that can protect the city going forward from these situations where it can come back to the city to have to maintain. So the developer in essence got a break because, and then it comes back to all the taxpayers to support these certain special neighborhoods that have these private roads, and the lack of equity, it doesn't seem equitable.
Well, I'm not sure which. What I heard Shane say was that if the suit was filed, something happened, that we could have a fairly ironclad defense against liability and payment. That's what I heard him say. I mean, one possible, when we plat a PUD or something like that, where there's quite often private roads, do the roads usually get platted separately, or do they get platted as part of, because I know from working on sidewalk projects, in other words, there's still some property owners who have ownership to the middle of the creek, to the middle of Bengal Boulevard. Which way do we usually typically plat it?
We see both. You see the parcels go all the way out to the road, and then the road's an easement, but for the larger developments that have private roads, it's typically
So
common
Giverny would
area,
have had a
Giverny, Granite Oaks.
put into a common area
Yeah.
for the
Common area for the HOA.
For the
for
HOA.
the HOA.
So one of the things that I asked, that would be possible would be if we left everything how it was. But these 6 parcels that are considered private access easements could apply for snow removal, the city to remove the snow.
At a cost.
That we would just do it, so that we would take over the snow removal of these 6. We would allow each of them to apply, so whether or not anybody else would, this Timberline Lane would. Is there the appetite to have Shane look into creating that? What would we call it, Shane? Did I describe that well enough?
Well, I guess what I would say is the council can choose to do what it likes. The general rule is that city funds can only be used for corporate purposes. There's a whole statute in the municipal code, a whole particular section of the municipal code that describes how the city can determine whether something is a corporate purpose. One way is to budget it. I think it would probably need to be a separate budget line item, maintenance of, private access easements or something like that would have to go on the budget every year. The other way is what I have traditionally called a quid pro quo analysis, where the city has to determine what it is getting for providing a private benefit, and that requires a formal analysis, a financial analysis, and an analysis of what benefits the city would be receiving for doing this. And then there needs to be a public hearing preceded by 14 days published notice, and then a decision by the city council. And then there's an appeal right for, I think, 30 days after the council decision is made. The problem with that approach to me is I don't know what, it seems to me that would have to be done every time any money was going to be, public money was going to be expended for this sort of, under this sort of quid pro quo analysis. And so I don't know that you could just do it once and figure that that's going to take care of it forever after. I think you'd have to repeatedly do it. So to me, the only feasible way to do it would be just be to have to budget it every year. One, sorry about the dogs. One thing that I just wanted to note, though, that makes me a little bit nervous is that at this point, it seems to me that we the city has an argument that we really haven't expressed any sort of use of this, at least this one particular roadway, except for maybe a slurry seal at some time in the distant past. But we don't do anything regularly where we start entering into regular snow plowing or something like that. Then it makes me a little bit worried that we're starting to get a little bit pregnant every time we do that, and it becomes more and more like a public road. So,
That
so
comes up
we
with-
try to graft around that, but that's a little bit of a concern for me.
So may I just better understand what you said? So the fact that there's a fire hydrant there and that the city might have done slurry work on the roadway since we incorporated as a city, would either of those two be a measurement of what you just described?
Don't we require fire hydrants for PUDs?
Could we,
I think, so that one wouldn't be, because Giverny would have to have fire hydrants or be sprinklers. That would be a requirement, and they're on private road. The other one was
Or whether it was ever slurry sealed?
that. Could honestly, that could happen 25 years ago, could happen 30 years ago, and they did it once. That would be a hard one to determine, but I kind of also go back. I thought of another solution. Shane can opine on this in a second, but part of it goes to the service with Whitford being the one service that takes a gigantic truck and drives it down every single road of the city every week, except private roads. And in the last 2 to 3 years, Ham's been working on it for a lot longer than that. We've actually got where we're going and auditing and finding out those places that the county says, yeah, we'll just do it. But they really shouldn't have been for a variety of reasons. And we're going through and we're auditing those out of the system. I think first you'd have to determine that providing the service is safe for our employees and for the homeowners. And if you determined that it was, could you use a special service district as a funding source?
I have never set up a special service district. It may be possible. I would have to look at that. If it did work, that may be a way to isolate the revenue and the expenditure in the one neighborhood, if that's what's desired. But I'm not prepared to opine on whether a special service district could be created.
And whether that would
In
alleviate,
this little neighborhood, or whether that would, yeah.
because
Ultimately,
provision of-
yeah, I mean, as we recognize, if the city were to go down that road, why then the revenue is raised from within the special service district, and so I don't know how that really benefits the residents from where they are now.
Well, it doesn't, it benefits all the other taxpayers.
Well, not if the revenue is being used within the neighborhood where the revenue is raised. But going back to what I heard the mayor say earlier, if there are some residents along this roadway who aren't willing to participate in the maintenance and others are, why, that may be a way to force the issue. I suspect that the residents also have a private cause of action against anybody that won't contribute their fair share if they're using the access to the roadway, just a normal lawsuit. Anyway, asking me some questions.
My concern is one, you have to do it for all. And then who's next? I'm gonna call because I've got 6 trees in my yard. I have private property. I want the city to come and trim all my trees. What's to say that's not the same type of request that's being put in right now?
I think that's an excellent point.
so, one of the things that we do is we participate in fixing sidewalks that, come from trees in the right of way that break up sidewalks, and we participate in the cost. So, I mean, I know what you're saying. Let me, one of my concerns, Shane, that we haven't really addressed is fire. So there's a fire hydrant on this access easement. So, does liability change at all if a home, a fire truck determines it can't get up there for whatever reason that's, a private access easement that's owned by us? Is there liability concerns on your end?
Well, there's always liability concerns because cities are viewed as deep pockets, and so, but the when the project went in, somebody made the decision, presumably Salt Lake County, that it was accessible for fire purposes. I'm sure that the county required that there was a fire hydrant there to, provide water as needed in an emergency. I don't know that the fact that fire hydrant is there changes and pre-existed, city ownership. It changes my view of how the city. I just don't see how the city becomes ultimately liable for things that may go wrong on this private roadway just because it owns bare fee title of the roadway and has never really used it in any material way in comparison to the folks that live along it that are using it to service their residences and to get mail delivery or fire access or whatever there may be. And certainly, we can go to the Utah Local Governments Trust and ask these questions, and they may have thoughts on the liability issue and decide that we have more liability. The city has more liability than I think it does.
The liability thing is a question. The liability thing is a question for me. I mean, why on earth do we own these things? It sounds like we don't have any liability. We don't have to do anything, but yeah, we own them. It's a super strange, weird
to get across.
thing.
Yeah.
And unless there's a surety that, if we don't have any liability, then I think it sounds like it's a little easier for the council here. If there's some liability, I don't know if we need some more clarification on that or not, but.
So maybe a couple things. Shane, if we could follow up with the trust, I think that would be a good thing to know. Let's get their legal opinion on it as well. Matt, would you be willing to do a cost analysis of what you think it would cost to remove snow from these 6 places?
And just to be clear, if we remove snow, does that also somehow tie us into doing any road maintenance?
Yeah,
or
that'll be
anything
road
else?
surfacing.
Well, and that's one of the issues I've been dealing with Woodward is I hate to get into a situation where we're providing it and we have been providing it for some of these private roads. And then they say, well, your trucks are the ones that did all the damage because,
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, when it comes to a road, a car does like this and a truck, does a lot more. Any agreements that we're doing along those lines have to be ironclad, but no, we're not assuming the wear and tear on the road because you're demanding that a truck come.
If you had that application process, Mayor, I don't know if that would work or not, but they're agreeing that it's just for snow plow. They assume some liability on it. I don't know.
Well, that's where a special service district might work a little better.
Yeah.
Because then you're not voluntarily having one guy out of 5 or 6 out of 47
It's everybody.
decide to. Because that shows up on your tax.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying all of your tax, or you're opposing the one thing, you've got 6 years to fix it.
Yeah.
Or your house.
Well,
goes down.
and only because we also have Tavachi kind of.
Well,
in
and that's.
the- And I brought that up in the deliberation of, whenever that was about Tavachi, that I could possibly consider supporting them coming into our city if there was a special service district set up whereby they then paid for this additional, all these, as best we can, projected costs that are come to the city. Again, as a form of being equitable to all taxpayers.
Yeah.
It seems I
Well, their
support.
big one was your private road and you're gonna stay that way.
Well, that's the problem. If we provide services, that classification of a private road
Could change.
diminishes. Because looking at this road here, if there's something at the end of there, we say we want to go ahead and put a trail up there, up that hill and every place else, they can't stop that. So that will bring in parking and everything else because now it's a public street. So there's a trade-off there.
Which, right, that's the trade-off. Am I on a public road or am I on a private road?
Exactly.
Does the classification change from a private access easement to public?
If we're using public funds.
So what would, I mean, how would the classification need to be changed? Could it be changed?
Well, it would have to become a dedicated public road, it seems to me. I was just remembering that probably 10 or 12 years ago, the city council at the time had a discussion about, I think that the roadway was a segment of 70th South at the time, and it was falling apart. The pavement was literally falling apart so that it was unusable. And so the residents petitioned the city council to just take over this roadway and turn it into a public road and fix it for them, because they didn't want to. They had recalcitrant residents along there, and not everybody was willing to pony up money to fix the road. And so the city council at the time enacted a portion of the code. I can't pull the chapter and verse out right now, but it deals with how private rights of way can become public rights of way through dedication to the city and acceptance by the city. But one of those requirements, one of the main requirements of that happening, was that the roadway had to be brought up to city standards before that could happen. And in that instance, it seems like there were grants and things that came into play, and ultimately that roadway segment was rebuilt, and it was accepted as a public road. And I think that it's worked well since then. And I guess to me, that's another option that maybe could happen here. I don't know anything about Timberline Drive and don't know if it can be brought up to city standards because of width issues or whatever, but you know,
You wouldn't have front setbacks. That particular road, though, the 7200 south that you're talking about also connects like 16 something east and 17th east. I mean, it actually is a through street as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of strange to find out that it was
So
ours.
I really appreciate this discussion. We'll have some to-do items for both Shane and Matt. Thank you for taking that on, and we'll continue this. So we do need to move on. So item 4 is just a review of calendars and upcoming events. October 27th, 5 to 7 is the Monster Mash at the Cottonwood Heights Rec Center. October 31st, 3 to 4:30 is our trunk or treat here at City Hall. Everybody can be here. November 21st is the general election for in Cottonwood Heights District 1 and 2. The voting centers will be open here at City Hall from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. for people to vote.
We're doing early voting here as well, Paula.
Yes. In person. voting.
So November 24th to the 7th is the holiday decorating contest. We'll talk about that more next time. And then November 27th, to light the heights at City Hall, where we light the Christmas tree here on our property. So we do have a closed meeting today. So to discuss litigation and property acquisition.
Yeah,
correct?
Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor, on that, I don't know if we have anything related to litigation. Shane provided information in the earlier about what you'll be voting on related to indemnification. We definitely have it on property acquisition.
Okay.
So I think maybe it's just property acquisition, unless Shane, you think that there's a need for litigation discussion.
I don't think that's needed this week.
Okay, so we'll just limit it to property acquisition. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to close the work session and enter into a closed session
That's fun.
to discuss pending litigation, to discuss property acquisition.
I'd move that we close the open session and open a closed session for the discussion of property acquisition.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Tim, you'll have an email sent with the link to that.
Give us 4 minutes. We don't have long because we have